Greetings, everyone. I am Angeline Ripolidon and I will be discussing the proponents of discourse theory. But first, let's define what is discourse theory. Discourse theory denotes broadly the study of aspects of language and communication distinct from linguistic structure. Language can be learned by communicating with the target language speaker. Who are the proponents of discourse theory? First, we have Michael Foucault. Foucault adapted the term discourse to denote a historically contingent social system that produces knowledge and meaning. He notes that discourse is distinctly material in effect, producing what he calls practices that systematically form the objects of which they speak. We also have Laclau and Murphy's discourse theory. The discourse establishes a closure, a temporary stop to the fluctuations in the meaning of the signs, but the closure is never definitive. The transition from the elements to the moments is never entirely fulfilled. Pierre Bourdieu also outlined a theory of practice emphasizes that practical knowledge and action are rooted in a habitus that resists theorizing or systematization in terms of abstract, underlying principles including those of economic interest. He also added that he speaks, for example, of not acquiring only language but socially constituted attitudes toward language and so can refer to Bourdieu's language, which nota bene is acquired as a habitus by growing up Bourdieu's not by explicit schooled instruction. Discourse as a mode of power, which in late capitalist societies means the enactment and legitimation of inequality, is the special emphasis of Marxists such as Louis Althusser, Michael Penches, and Frederick Jameson. These Marxist writers have stimulated new interest in Voloshinov's Marxism and the philosophy of language in 1929, and the more general view of discourse as embodying the conflicting values and stances of different groups found in Bakhtin's discourse in the novel. Discourse theory, also defined by Hans-Georg Gadamer and Jürgen Habermas and Thomas Kuhn, emphasizes that every discourse takes place within a shared horizon of pre-understanding or life world that cannot be fully or explicitly formulated. They added, no discourse can be completely self-grounded and the ability to function as a participant cannot be acquired wholly from a book, but arises from initiation and experiences. Relevant concepts here include the notions of discourse community and culture. Lastly, we have Stephen Krashen's theory. He defined discourse theory as encourages acquisition of a language which is a product of subconscious processes rather than the learning which is what takes place under explicit instruction. Most theories of discourse examine the relation of language to structure.
Good day, everyone. I am Shaina Amy Manga from 1BSE-A1, and today I will be discussing about the overview of the discourse theory. But first of all, let us all know what is discourse theory.
What is the discourse theory? Discourse theory is a field of research composed of multiple heterogeneous, largely qualitative, approaches to the study of relationships between language in use and the social world. Researchers in the field typically view language as a form of social practice that influences the social world and vice versa. The popularity of discourse as a critical concept and the linguistic turn more generally has been criticized for sidelining the study of concrete problems on the one hand and the continued role of capital and class in structuring power relationships on the other. Within discourse theory, one can distinguish between at least three strands: post-structuralist, normative deliberative, and critical realist discourse theories. Post-structuralist discourse theory usually insists on the constitutive role of language and communication for what counts as real in a given society. For normative deliberative theories, discourse designates the negotiation of an agreement between participants who enter discourse in order to overcome a conflict while pursuing certain interests and objectives. While post-structuralist and normative deliberative discourse theorists are firmly situated within the constructivist social sciences and humanities, some discourse theorists who have defended a moderate realism consider discourse to be a social practice embedded in given power structures. Discourses are for understanding and directing different domains of social action. They are composed not only of specific vocabularies and rhetorical techniques, but also modes of thinking, grammars, rationalities, and even specific material practices that represent, interpret, and create reality.
Processes of discourse theory. When we conduct discourse analysis, we might focus on, first, the purpose and effects of different types of language. Second, cultural rules and conventions and communication. Third, how values, beliefs, and assumptions are communicated. And lastly, language use relates to its social, political, and historical context. In several humanities and social science fields, such as linguistics, sociology, anthropology, psychology, and cultural studies, discourse analysis is a widely used qualitative research technique. What is discourse theories? It is the study of language and communication in general, as opposed to linguistic structure. It is referred to as discourse theory. However, the majority of discourse theories look at the relationship between language and structure, and there are at least three distinct subfields of discourse theory: the post-structuralist, normative deliberative, and critical realist. First, post-structuralist. Post-structuralist discourse theory usually insists on the constitutive role of language and communication for what counts as real in a given society. Rather than as closed container, the social is perceived as an open, dynamic, and heterogeneous terrain of relationship. Sausure's primacy of difference over identity, or Wittgenstein's practical turn in social theory, adopts a resolutely anti-essentialist stance. Second, normative deliberative. For normative deliberative discourse theory, discourse is the negotiation of an agreement between participants who enter discourse in order to overcome a conflict while pursuing certain interests and objectives. Discourse, in this sense, usually involves free deliberation in the public sphere over what can be considered good and acceptable for all. According to this perception, the discourse participants need to come to terms with clashing norms in discourse. Third and lastly, critical realist. Critical realist discourse theories usually have an affinity with microsociological theories of social and cultural inequality, ranging from the Marxist critique of ideology to Pierre Bourdieu's work on symbolic domination. In drawing from this tradition, linguists have become interested in social problems and critical discourse analysis, or CDA. Marxist sociologists have discovered discourse to be a constitutive dimension in the dynamics of power. According to Inger Muller et al., the essential significance of language, communication, or meaning in social, political, and cultural theory unites these ideal typical discourse theory streams, albeit the line between them is not always clear.
So, hi! Good morning to each and everyone. So, I am Jennifer Villogaras and I am a part of Group 6. And we are tasked by our professor, Ma'am Rodora Melgar, to report about discourse theory. So, what really is discourse theory? So, let me explain it to you. So, discourse theory it follows from a theory of language use, in which communication is treated as the matrix of linguistic knowledge. That language development should be considered in terms of how the learner discovers the potential meaning of language as he participates in communication. That is what discourse theory is.
Good day everyone, I am Oliver D. Traya and I will be talking about the examples of discourse theory in language acquisition. So we have 4 examples here. First is the discourses of health and illnesses. Second is the construction of prejudice. Third, the gender in talk. And lastly, the leadership in an organization. Discourse is a process in which language can be learned by communicating with the target language speaker. Discourse plays a vital role in the language development process. It encourages acquisition of a language, which is a product of subconscious processes rather than the learning, which is what takes place under explicit instruction. So now, let us proceed to the first example. The first example is the discourses on health and illnesses. The article, which was authored by Kirsten Bell in 2010, shows that Bell is interested in how cancer patients and cancer survivors engage with lifestyle discourses about the importance of lifestyle factors in contributing to cancer and their role in managing disease, recurrence, or progression. These lifestyle discourses can be found in scientific, medical, and health resources. The discourses will be recognizable to most people. They can be regarded as part of common sense or shared cultural knowledge. In addition, Bell notes that people who attend support groups have been found to develop collective understandings so that these discourses may be regarded as part of the more local knowledge or culture of the groups themselves. And now, let us proceed to the second example. The second example is the construction of prejudice. The second article, The Construction of Prejudice of Jovan Byford of 2006, has been chosen as an example of interdisciplinary research which brings together history, political science, and social psychology. It is also an example of discourse analysis conducted across 2 languages. The project presented in the article is part of a long tradition of discourse analytic research into prejudice and racism. There is now a significant body of findings on forms of talk and argument through which social inequalities are rationalized and perpetuated. Researchers have investigated the contemporary language and language practices which attach a negative value to certain groups or categories of people. For example, in a study of white New Zealanders talking about indigenous New Zealanders, Wetherell and Potter noted how talk about culture could be used instead of the direct references to race. The central argument of such discourse analytic research is that these new formulations exclude people without violating contemporary social taboos against the open expression of prejudice. In other words, These kinds of talk and writing function as negatively as the more explicit biased, prejudiced, and racist talk, which is now seen as inconsistent with the general values of tolerance. Related to this, discourse analysts have also explored the kind of political rhetoric which attempts to redefine the nation in order to exclude a negatively valued group. Now, let us proceed to the third example, which is the gender in talk. The third example is the article Gender in Talk of Elizabeth Stokoe. It is an example of discourse research which looks at the social problem and also contributes to a major area of social science research on gender. It is a piece of feminist discursive research in which gender identities are considered as performances, constructions, and enactments rather than rigid and unchanging essences. And for our last example, the leadership in an organization. The fourth example is the leadership in an organization, an article by Ruth Wodak, Winston Kwon, and Ian Clark. It discusses discourse analytic research in the area of workplace and organization studies. In the words of the authors and researchers, the research adopts an interdisciplinary discourse-oriented approach to leadership in meetings and teams studying discourse in use. Whenever you communicate with someone about a topic, either in writing or speaking, you are participating in a discourse. Since communication happens all the time, discourse is a huge part of our everyday lives. It is absolutely vital, especially as part of the language learning process. Discourse, as part of the implicit language instruction, actually plays a different role in language learning than explicit instruction. The emphasis in discourse is communication. As students practice more discourse, their language use becomes more fluid. Discourse helps them practice communication strategies for when they need to discuss a concept they are less familiar with. Whether you are communicating in your native language or a second language, sometimes you want to talk about something that you just don't have the words for. In these situations, people fall back on different communication strategies to get their point across. These can include paraphrasing, substitution of a known word or phrase, or circumlocution. Circumlocution is when you go the long way around the concept. For example, if you didn't know the word blueberry, you might say it is a small blue round fruit that grows on bushes. It takes more effort, but with circumlocution, you can use words you do know to get the point across regarding a word you don't know. With more discourse and communication practice, the need for these strategies dwindles. However, regardless of your fluency in a language, there will always come a time when you need to use them. We have also the discourse in the classroom. So, discourse is a useful tool in both native and second language in classrooms. In either case, the communication strategies tend to be the same, and implicit instruction is equally important for any language learning. In a classroom setting, of course, it is best used to complement explicit instruction. Communication activities can easily be tailored to suit the topic being taught at the time.
So now, let's move on to the criticisms of discourse, which is task for me to report. So there are 6 criticisms on discourse theory. So later on, I will discuss what are those. But the first is, it is just about words. The second will be, doesn't take enough account of people. The third one is, interviews are not appropriate source of data because interview is a part of discourse or theory, or it is connected to discourse theory. And then the fourth one is, only produces interpretation, not facts. Number 5 is, it is out of date. And number 6, it do have methodological weaknesses. So later on, I will discuss one by one. For now, let's move on to the next slide. It is just about words. Only focus on words and languages. It doesn't take account on nonverbal communication, body language, emotions, visual representations or objects, space, and etc. It only investigates how text and talk contribute to produce power but does not include other important matters, for example, parliamentary speeches, news reports, official statements, and etc. Second is it does not take account of people, makes claim on social phenomena rather than particular people, concerned with meanings and practices which are primarily social impacting the constitutive of individuals that is usually investigated through their particular practices. Example, their talking practices. The third one is interviews are not appropriate source of data. It is not a natural form of talk because the topics are imposed to lead them to what they will talk about. Not completely different in other contexts, but will overlap in many respects. For example, in the ways in which speakers follow conventions or how the interviewer tells them to organize their speech. The fourth one is it only produces interpretation, not facts. According to Skegel, analysts would bring their own interest to talk to and then freely interpret the talk as being about that. As for example, an analyst would look at a conversation between man and woman and decide it as inevitably about gender. And part of its theoretical foundation consists of challenges to the concept of truth. The fifth one is it is out of date. The term discourse is still used but conducted under different labels. For example, in the areas of discursive psychology and rhetorical psychology is a development from the sources which originally referred to as discourse analysis. And other social researchers incorporate discourse analysis into differently named research like ethnography or psychosocial. And last but not the least, methodological weakness. This course analysis doesn't have a concrete method applied to the learners or the participants, and it has an unclear method.